Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, or Tiger Tank 12, I wanna call me. I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks with another review. Today the T-44-100, a tier 8 Soviet medium tank, a premium medium tank, and one that one viewer has always described as the best tier 8 premium medium, at least for his own playstyle, because it combines several things that make a medium tank great. That is mobility, decent gun, and a little bit of armor, and I think some great spotting and concealment. Now, the T-44-100 is probably one of the older premium medium tanks, at least an older version, because they back in the days they didn't have a lot of ammo, or they didn't have a lot of penetration with their standard rounds, because 190 millimeters of penetration back then, let's say about 5 to 6 years ago, was more than enough at tier 8 to, deal with other tier 8 vehicles and even tier 9s. But nowadays, having 190 millimeters of penetration is rather lackluster. If we just go over to an AMBT, for example, you can see it has 215. That's right there, 25 millimeters of penetration more. And the APCR shells that this tank carries has a whopping 278, while the APCR shells from the T-44-100 only has 247. Because back in the days, that's all you needed. Nowadays, you can still work with it. It's just a little bit harder with certain vehicles that, even at tier 8, are really, really well armored. For example, the Object 274A. This tank is really well armored at the front. That's just something that other tanks just cannot hold with, and it has 227 millimeters of penetration. So, the T-44-100, what kind of a gun do we have on it? It's a 100 millimeter gun, the LB1, and basically you have a very, very good rate of fire. You have, about the average alpha of 250, which you kind of expect of a 100 millimeter gun. You have decent dispersion values and aim time values, and you have 7 degrees of gun depression. Having 7 degrees of gun depression on a Soviet tank is really, really nice, and the traverse speed is also fairly fast. Now, one of the major downsides for this tank, and just in my opinion, is the average damage, the alpha damage, kind of is lackluster nowadays. 250 alpha damage is not that great, especially since there are a lot of other tanks that now have 320 average alpha damage, for example the CS52 Liz, but you can still work with it. It's just a little bit of an annoyance, and it's no longer like really up to date for the game that we're playing right now. And the 190 millimeters of penetration. These are the two biggest downsides to this vehicle in my opinion, because other than that, the T-44-100 is still a very, very nice tank. Now, it has 1,350 hit points, which is about the average for a tier 8 Soviet medium tank. T-54 prototype is about the same, even a little bit less, but better armor. But you still have 90 millimeters at the front, 75 at the side, 45 at the back. So with the nice angling here, you're going to be bouncing quite a few shots when you're playing this vehicle. And also the traverse speed on the T-44-100 is really, really good. So sometimes players actively are wiggling like really aggressively with the T-44-100, and then the armor becomes kind of funny because people do kind of bounce off the frontal slope that you have right here. It's not the let's be honest though, it's not going to be bouncing all of the shots. It's not going to be bouncing a majority of the shots, but the armor is still there to assist you in certain situations, and you can't completely rely on it, but at least you can be sure that no one is going to be penning you with high explosive at the front. At least that, 190 millimeters of turret armor at the front, 130 on the side, 100 at the back. That is all fine. The issue is just the 190 millimeters you have at the front, because a lot of tanks now have more than 200 millimeters of penetration at tier 8. They're going to be able to go through your turret. They're going to be able to go through your front. Depending on what caliber, what kind of penetration, some tier 8 vehicles, especially heavy tanks, were able to just go right through my cheeks. So you have to be kind of cautious with it. You do not want to be sticking your turret out for too long because the cupola on top also is quite easy to hit if you're close by. So it's not an auto pen most of the time, but it's also not an auto bounce. So depending on what tank you're facing, if it's a medium tank at tier 8, you're gonna have decent chances of not getting penetrated. But when it's like a tank destroyer or a heavy tank, I would be rather cautious with the turret, because it's not gonna be as powerful or as well protected as, for example, the T-54 prototypes. Even though that one is just 10 millimeters stronger, but I have the feeling like it bounces a lot more than the T-44-100's turret. Mobility-wise, this tank is really, really great. Great specific power to weight ratio. You're going to be accelerating really quickly. You have great top speed, 52 kph instead of the 50 or 45 kph. This used to be one of the faster tier 8 premium tanks back then. You could use a turbo on it to get like 57 kph on the vehicle, but since the specific power to weight ratio is already that good, I didn't feel the urge to use a turbo, so I went with the improved ventilation class 2 just to get a little bit of a bonus. And traverse speed is pretty damn good as well, so mobility wise this tank really is going to be up your alley if you like to have fast medium tanks and you like to play maybe even light tanks. This is a tank that is really mobile. Concealment wise, the tank itself is actually quite nicely concealed if you have concealment trained on your crew, and if you have improved ventilations on it as well. This tank can stay hidden very nicely, and you can also go with premium consumables, and push that even further. Spotting wise, it's actually not too bad. Base view range is at 380, which is about the average for Soviet tier 8 medium tanks, or used to be the average. I'm not sure what the Object 274A has. 390, so it gets a boost by 10 meters. But I use the Coated Optics Class 1 just to give me a little bit of a boost in the view range department, and with 454 meters view range that I have on this tank, I think I'm going to be doing just fine. And I also went for the gun rammer class 2 because I think you don't need the vertical stabilizer, you don't need improved rotation mechanism because the tank turns around really quickly. You could build a second kind of category where you go for like a scouting setup. You can go with commander's vision system, low noise exhaust. That's also a possibility if you're on an open map and you don't have any scouts. Other than that, well, I mean, you can obviously go for turbocharger. Like, I don't think you need to do anything about the dispersion. 0.31 with the field modifications is quite nice, and I think it's going to be accurate more than enough, even if you're at like longer distances. So that's exactly what I went for. I went for module durability increase because the hull traverse and the turret traverse is really fast. So it doesn't matter to me if I get a -4% penalty on it. Improved sight for better accuracy, less dispersion, anti-reflective headlight coating for more concealment, and finally I went with scouting instead of survivability. I've never played the T-44 with like improved hardening or something like that, but if you're using like the additional survivability slot, you would get 10% more HP on it in the end, and you would be like, almost 1500 HP. That kind of sounds nice, but I think the spotting is more important for me, since I like to be more of a active medium tank that also scouts. And I think, generally speaking, the T-44-100 with this setup is quite a nice little vehicle. So let's jump into the game and see how far you can go with this tank. It doesn't have any preferential matchmaking, just so you know, and how far you can go with the limited amount of penetration you have, and if that is really like a very big downside to the tank, or if you can actually work with it by having acute knowledge of the weak spots on vehicles, and also when to push and when to get into certain positions. So let's take a look at what we're going to be able to do here on the Fjords map in a tier 9, tier 10 game. Pretty much the worst setup you can have, but at the same time, the opponents that you have are actually all, I'd say they should all be fun. at least with your tank. I think 190 millimeters of penetration are going to work out just in your favor. So we kind of skipped the very beginning because I don't want to make the video too long, but you can see how fast, how quickly this tank is able to get into an aggressive position, and also that the turret is not just for show. It does work, but it's not going to be extremely reliable. It will bounce certain shots from certain calibers, but other tanks will just go right through, and in this gameplay you'll see that happen quite a few times. We take out the standard B because we have a very high rate of fire, and with the help of the Chauffeur we knock him out fairly quickly, and now we have a couple of vehicles all the way back there that we can shoot at. Now, I think the aim time and the dispersion values on the vehicle are they're good enough that you don't really need any like aiming devices or field modifications to improve the accuracy by a lot. There is one field modification I would really pick, and that is the one that does help you with the accuracy, just because if it's already there, why not pick it? So we tracked the E50, who has gone up a very aggressive path, but unfortunately it's too late, and we have already managed to take the position over here, so he is now in big trouble and gets knocked out by us. These games, as you can see, they go really fast nowadays. I've had quite a bit of trouble getting gameplays that are longer than 5 to 6 minutes, because this game has already been decided in the first 3 minutes. But unfortunately, that's just the way World of Tanks is nowadays, and probably has to do with the fact that everyone is so freaking fast. But when you are chasing these games, you need to have a tank that is capable of getting you from one point to another. And I think the T-44-100 is certainly one of those tanks. As you can see, we're able to put some nice sniping shots into the AMX and the IS-3. But we do sadly lack the penetration to reliably go for the IS-3 from the front. But with this angle and this height, we should be above them, and we should be able to go through the tank. Unfortunately, the IS-3 does manage to go right through our turret, and as I mentioned prior, the turret is a little bit of a weak spot, especially when people are firing premium ammunition. But so far so good. We have dealt more than 2,600 damage. The DPM is decent enough, but the alpha is just kind of sad. It's a little bit, it's a little bit underwhelming. That's one of my biggest gripes with the tank, and with the penetration, or the lack of penetration that you have on the AP shell. Other than that, I think this is a really good platform. It plays really quick. It's extremely responsive. You don't have to worry about having no mobility. You don't have to worry about having no armor, because the armor is good enough to withstand at least like these non-aimed shots usually. And I think the rate of fire kind of makes the tank also a very nice, valuable asset as a supportive role. Now obviously it's not a CS52 Liz. I probably would prefer a CS52 Liz instead of the T-44-100, if I may say so, because it has better alpha and it just feels like you have a bigger impact with every single shot you take. But do not underestimate this tank. It has it has a decent rate of fire, and it is capable of doing a lot of damage if it is unattended and if nobody really cares about you. So right now we're kind of pushing this Tiger 2, just trying to play with him, because he is now the only tank that is going to be alive, and for me it's all about getting more than 2,000 damage. I want to go into the 3,000 damage line, so I'm hoping for a little opening where the Tiger 2 will have to face another tank and look the other way, and where I can actually shoot him into the side of the turret. Now if the tank would actually have 280 alpha, I think that would have been a much better kind of addition. But other than that, I think the T-44 is still a very nice tank. It still will get you kills and damage. There are just other options out there that have done the same things but do other things even better. So that is kind of making it difficult to recommend the T-44-100 in some regards. But overall, this is a great tank, good mobility, decent armor, even decent turret armor, and a gun that does a lot of damage over a long period. If you always are firing, but doesn't have the alpha damage to, to do the single shot damage. And the pen is a bit lacking, even on the APCR shells, which only have 247mm of penetration. As I mentioned in the beginning of this review, this tank is an old school premium vehicle, and thus you can kind of see that some things have not changed and it still has these old characteristics, but it still does fairly well. It performs fairly well. That means that this tank kind of held up alright, and I understand why why this viewer is such a big fan of the tank, because it's actually a lot of fun and it's quite enjoyable. And I think that's going to be the most important part. If you're looking for a Soviet medium tank that is very fast, can be played as a light tank, that has some sort of protection, that has enough spotting with the right equipment, and is a lot of fun, then this is probably a very good option. So I hope you guys did enjoy this review. I know it's a bit of a shorter one, but I want to keep my reviews a bit shorter nowadays, because else I don't want to make huge productions anymore, which are 1 hour or something like that, because it's really difficult to watch the entire thing. So I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.